In the world of Aesaris, the very realm and the mortals in it are twice bathed in the blood of the Exalted One, granting them the ability to cast magic, or so it is said. Its earliest concepts are decipherable, like reading the definitions of a word in a dictionary, but as you delve deeper towards its core, it becomes more and more esoteric. Some would say it is akin to delving into the void. This will be a video about the magic systems for the world of Aesaris, a homebrew setting created by yours truly, and one that I've been using to run my D&D campaigns for over the past 5 years. The first thought that came to mind was, what kind of magic system did I even want? Did I want a soft or hard magic system? Ultimately came down to wanting a little bit of both. A magic system that has some clear-cut rules, but one that also allows for the more wondrous aspects of magic to still flourish. It's understood enough by the people of the world to have it be manipulated in interesting ways, but still possesses the many unknown factors and possibilities that can lend way to certain arcane theorems that could pose even wider questions for the world itself. This set me on a path to defining some key objectives I wanted this system to achieve. My objective was mainly to do 3 things. 1. Have a neat system that's fairly unique to the world and has a breadth of understanding like a hard magic system and the unknown beauty of a soft magic system. I called this a firm magic system. It's soft, but not quite hard either. In this system, magic works under a certain network of guidelines, but as your knowledge deepens, it becomes much more free and wondrous. But it isn't without its dangers, as going beyond the threshold of pervade knowledge is extremely difficult and oftentimes results in madness. Sometimes piercing the veil is the last thing you want to do. The second objective I had was that I wanted to set out to make the pillars of the magic casting system of my world based on the fundamental ideas of D&D, because this magic system was to be used and incorporated into my D&D games as a way to describe and explain the phenomenon of magic to my players in a way that makes tangible sense and a way that can be easily explained, while also creating stringent definitions for what is and isn't possible within the confines of magic within the world, at least to their knowledge. For instance, one thing that the system sets out to explain is why only certain classes can wield certain magic items, and how and why a wizard can cast so many spells, but a sorcerer can't, despite being quote-unquote closer to magic than the wizard is, and apply this thought process across an entire world setting, making sense of the phenomenon and going from the ground up. And third and lastly, I wanted to make the concepts of level ups a tangible, explainable phenomenon that actually makes sense. I like the idea of being able to explain why a character can level up in the first place, and what exactly makes 2 mortals different despite them both being mortals. I mean, if you put them side by side, they'd look the same. There'd be no discernible difference, but there has to be something more that makes a high-level mortal different than a low-level mortal, than just quote-unquote experience, because that doesn't make a lot of sense. So, within my magic system, I set out to not only explain level ups, but to also give the natural growth of my players a grounded reason for its occurrence in the first place, and give an explanation for this growth, and also how it can be cultivated as well. And this is where we discuss the backbone of magical possibility within the world of Aesaris. The Arcane Soul. And it's something that every creature within the worlds of Aesaris possesses, and is a core fundamental part of a mortal's relationship with magic. It works like a metaphysical muscle. You can train through practice to become more powerful as a magic caster, but this isn't always linked to magic casting. You see, magic within Aesaris is like good radiation. Having a suffused arcane soul can toughen one's body. It can sharpen your mind. It can quicken your reflexes and enhance your overall sensitivity to magic itself. I really love the idea of everyone in a given world having their potential be limitless if they decided to cultivate their arcane abilities. And although everyone possesses an arcane soul, it doesn't necessarily mean everyone is a caster of some kind. The Arcane Soul is literally the soul and serves as one's conduit for all matters of the arcane, whether it be casting magic or channeling an arcane item like a sword or a shield. It ties into everything. Your arcane soul is indeterminately set when you're born, and from there on, you're able to cultivate it further as you go through life. A person can be born with a small, average, or large arcane soul, which determines the overall potency of their spellcasting and what archetype of caster they might fall into later on if that's what they choose to pursue. Starting early is typically advised but not necessary, as there are a lot of very real mortal limits to how much one can simply learn and practice. This is where the concept of cultivating oneself comes into play. Most people of Aeseris who train in the arcane will usually cap out at around level 2 or 3. With those who are exceptional making it to the level 3 mark, there are some who will break past this and potentially attain power along the lines of a level 4 or 5 character. However, this is only reserved for the talented. Going outside of arcane schools and into the life of adventuring is where the arcane soul can grow exponentially. It strengthens through the growth of you as a person and bathing in the magic of the world itself, being in perilous situations or overcoming hardships that serve to push one forward. This is how a mortal can break those barriers of their physical boundaries and seem almost demigod-like to the average person. Immortal we would define as being somewhere in the realms of levels 5 to 7, would naturally account for 15 to 1% of the population, depending on their given area within the world. So for every 1,000 people, there'd be only 150 or so individuals of this caliber walking around freely within the city walls. The 8th level within the world of Aeseris signifies the pinnacle of what a mortal can achieve by themselves in the primary world, and would account for about 0.1% of the population. Breaking past this barrier for most mortals is impossible without the aid of ancient relics, the assistance of higher magical creatures, or even the deities themselves. You see, when you bathe in the magic of another world, this surges one's arcane soul, causing your body to physically change as the ambient magics of the other world flow through it. Commonly, when a 7th or 8th level adventurer is brushing up on their mortal limit, they may naturally not know that they are at all, but see venturing to other worlds as a test of their prowess, a way to find treasure or even complete a quest, which sees some of them walking many, many worlds. There is a location within my world called Alemthalis where this practice is ingrained in the culture itself. Adventurers seek to go to the Fey realms to continue their time there, to seat themselves in the mythos of bards and taverns and have their songs sang long after they're dead. But what they don't know is that by doing this, by seeking to go to these other worlds, they're elevating themselves and going beyond their mortal limits. A well-traveled adventurer that's gone to at least one other realm may attain up to level 10 in terms of their physical prowess, their arcane ability, etc. The creatures born on that world, though, will have their arcane souls sufficiently suffused with the magic of these different realms, and from the very moment of their birth, will have a much higher threshold for potential. Now, this does give way to there being entire story arcs and adventures that are had on completely other worlds. There are some players of mine that have never even been to the Prime Plane, but they've been playing in my games for well over a year, and they've solely been having their adventure in a world that is in addition to the Prime Plane. However, I might talk about my Outer Realms and how all that stuff works in a future video. For now, let's get back to the Arcane Soul. In this section, we'll be discussing casting magic, and when a caster wishes to use a spell, there is a natural order for how things typically go. They well up their Arcane Soul or pull on the ambient magic that flows throughout the world to assist them with their spell casting. As this welling occurs, an arcane practitioner will then funnel this magic through their Magi's Capillaries, which run all throughout their body. The Magi's Capillary, to explain, is a network of metaphysical veins that run throughout one's body and aren't typically subject to being physically tampered with. The Magi's capillaries absorb the magic of the soul into the body in order to use it to fuel spells that are cast, funneling the magic to node points located on the body. These node points are for the emission of spells and are located at the hands, feet, and throat, which neatly encompasses the power of verbal and somatic components, as when one casts a spell, a shimmer can be heard on the voice, and for somatic spells, a very visual magic circle brims to life with runes, as one might associate with magic casting. I thought to explain the mechanic of spell slots in that your Magi's capillaries are simply tired, as your spell slots are exhausted. Not in the way of physical exhaustion, but more in the way of spiritual exhaustion, a sort of mental tiredness, like you had just got done with a 4-hour intensive workout and need to rest to completely recover. Another side to arcane mastery that I thought of was magic flow efficiency. Basically, how little magic do you have to use in order to get the job done? Think of how a master craftsman creates a beautiful work in half the time it takes an amateur to make something half-baked. There are less wasted strokes and energy. Every movement and flow builds to a compounding sense of completeness. As the master craftsman works, it is smooth and refined. The amateur, less so, with wasted energy, which tires them out a lot faster than the master. The master can ultimately work for longer on less energy. This example is in effect magic flow efficiency. A mage can have a small arcane soul, but a great amount of magic flow efficiency, and can use tricks like learning how to pull from the ambient magic in the air to make up for the potency they ultimately lack within themselves. A great mage doesn't always have to have a mythic level arcane soul and they were born a legendary great mage effectively. They just have to be cunning and a little smart as to where they place their metaphorical weight when casting a spell. Half-casters are best explained as individuals who may have had a solid arcane soul for casting when they were young, but maybe due to circumstances, maybe their family was poor, so they couldn't be sent off to wizarding school, and maybe that individual just wasn't really into magic. For one reason or another, they never cultivated it, and much like a muscle that's been unused for a long time, it goes semi-dormant and shrinks over time. But their magic flow efficiency stays the same, which is why they're able to cast spells and partake in other training types without having to devote their entire lives to the practice, with, of course, reduced effectiveness, which explains why half-casters don't achieve the same level of power as a full caster would in a given world. Magic flow efficiency comes down to having it as a natural knack, an instinct, and is something that can be taught. However, one's ability to use this effectively is what separates the great from the mediocre. And on the topic of hardships, what about those who wish to cheat? What about those who wish to artificially increase their effectiveness for spellcasting? Surely drugs, potions, or even spells would have been created to do just that, right? Well, spells like that were invented. However, tampering with something as sensitive as the soul has its drawbacks and complications. Forcing one's body to take on more than it can handle, more magic than it can handle, can overburden it and place unprecedented amounts of stress onto your soul. In most cases, it shortens the individual's lifespan considerably, and does so each time they cast magic. It can cause their own magic to backfire against them whenever they go to cast. And in the worst case scenario, their body cannot contain the excess that they have taken on, and they just fall apart. Either in a violent explosion of magic essence, or in a gentle disintegration. Their flesh and body falling apart like burned paper. And sometimes they're twisted into some arcane monster whose will is simply to destroy or consume any nearby sources of magic, even if it comes directly from the forms of other mortals. The rising of such creatures has been stemmed in recent times. However, there are some that exist from ancient times, in the chest cavities of old fallen kingdoms, deep inside the hollowed out cubes, as they lay there dormant and waiting. And that brings us to the end of our video. If you enjoyed this, be sure to like and subscribe, as I'll be going over the many archetypes of arcane mages that exist within the world of Aeseris in part 2 of this video. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next one.